Now, European leaders are gathering in Brussels. The summit this Thursday comes as the bloc mulls ramp up in defense spending and more support for Kyiv. Gathering also comes as uncertainty over the relationship with the United States mounts. This after the US President Donald Trump said the EU was created to screw the US. We can now bring in Paul van Hooft, research leader in defense and security at RAND Europe. Thank you very much for joining us on the program today. Now, the Kremlin says Europe's plans for militarization are at odds with the mood in Russia and the United States. Are they wrong? Because Russia and the US seem intent on reestablishing links.
Um, well, I'm not sure. We have to speculate on what the Russian intentions are, but their actions in the last years suggest that they are intent on providing a wider threat to NATO, to the European allies. So under those conditions, it seems very reasonable to me for the European states to build up sufficient capabilities to defend Europe, to defend allies, to deter Russia. Also in the condition that the US might not be entirely available to play its part, right? And that could be given the political discussions having, but it's clear that the US itself has said that its priority right now is not Europe, but instead Asia and its border security. So under those conditions, I think it's fairly reasonable that the Europeans continue to arm themselves.
But Donald Trump thinks that Russia is no longer a threat because he's back in the White House. Is the U.S. president delusional?
Um, I wouldn't. I don't think that's it's my place to kind of make assessments of the U.S. president. He was chosen. These are the priorities that he signaled before he was elected. And I think it's more a mistake on the European part not to prepare to take care of their extreme dependency on the US for their own security. This is also in some sense not entirely new, right? 3 years ago, just after the invasion, the Biden administration published the defense strategy, which said that Russia was a threat in Europe, but that China was really the major priority for the US government. So in that sense, for Europeans, or for at least for some Europeans, to be caught off guard by the deprioritization of Europe is, I think, more their own unwillingness to read the room in the US.
The US and Russia are due to start talks in Saudi Arabia early next week. Some would suggest on how to bring the war in Ukraine to an end. They seem intent on doing this bilaterally without Ukraine, without Europe at the table. Yet we've seen moves from Europe in recent weeks. Europe has tried and failed to get its voice heard. Now there is this plan to rearm. Is this a way for Europe to get a seat at the table?
Yeah, well, I think there's always two functions to building up military capabilities, right? There's a version of it which says we are looking to defend something we care about, NATO territory, our European partners, all these aspects of it. We're building up these capabilities to deter Russia if it seeks an opportunity, but also, and I think the U.S. administration has also been clear on this in several times. If the Europeans don't have military capabilities, they don't really get a seat at the table. So also for those reasons, it makes a lot of sense to have the ability to build up. And there is a question here of this. This is a direct security concern for Europe, Ukraine, the outcome of the Ukraine war. It's also, I think, made a normative commitment. So regardless of what the U.S. seeks to do or not do in Ukraine, and whether it wants to get out of the conflict as quickly as possible to put its resources elsewhere, which is all a choice that U.S. administration can make. I think it's still in the European interest to have other plans in place and other ways to compensate for that.
It seems that Europe is always playing catch up. We've had Donald Trump's first presidency. Europe was aware that he's not the most reliable, if you will. Then we had Biden, who came back on the picture. We had an election that was looming. We saw what Donald Trump kept saying on the campaign trail when it came to NATO, Europe, what have you. Now Trump is back in the White House. Now that European guarantee, security guarantee, is now up in the air, and Europe seems to be left shocked. How is Europe left shocked?
Well, I think actually that's a good question. It depends also who in Europe, right? There are, I think the different French governments have been preparing for longer to take care of some of the dependencies that they had on the US. I think it has deep historical causes. There's a psychological element to it. And let's not forget that US administrations for the last 75 years have put a lot of effort into convincing Europeans that they were a clear priority, right? So they've put a lot of energy into this before. So I think for a lot of European leaders, it was hard to believe that at some point, simply put, we would not be a priority anymore. And then there are other reasons for it as well. It's the European institutions, both sort of the EU institutions, but also institutions in various countries, are not necessarily designed to adapt quickly to new strategic circumstances. And certainly in the last 30 years, 25 years, for a long period of time, there was not much reason to adapt that quickly. So it's not just that the minds are changing; it's also that the national security systems are trying to catch up on all these developments. And those two combinations together, combined with the fact that we're talking about 24 countries, that does make it very hard to have a very fast, decisive response.
Indeed, Paul Van Hooft, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you so much for joining us on the program today.
You're welcome.